You know, I often hear it said that we in Canada, that we're lucky. That this is a lucky country, by which people mean we're lucky to be in peaceful North America, far from conflicts that rend societies in less favored parts of the world, or we're lucky to have been given a free endowment of natural resources, or we're lucky to be able to attract such vast numbers of newcomers. But I believe that people make their own luck. People make their own luck. And that the luck of Canadians is no exception. I believe that if we are lucky, as I believe we are, it is because we have been endowed by our forebears with a set of attitudes and beliefs about individual freedom and responsibility, about the limits of government, about the rule of law, about the dignity of work, and the centrality of family to social and economic life. But that social capital, like any capital, must be maintained and renewed or it will wear out. This too is why we are here, to make sure our luck doesn't run out. The founders of Canada had high hopes for us. They thought that Canada was a land of great promise for the generations to come. That's what Sir Wilfrid Laurier meant when he so famously proclaimed that the 20th century would belong to Canada. And that was no mere rhetoric, for Canada was a society characterized by tremendous dynamism. We built the CPR. I don't know if you can imagine the magnitude of that project, given the size of the society that we represented. We built political institutions to govern a vast and sparsely populated territory. We performed feats of military prowess far greater than our small size may have led one to expect. And we attracted vast numbers of newcomers, hosting one of the largest inflows of people relative to our local population ever seen in history. Living in the shadow of America, where everything is done on a grand scale, where it makes it sometimes hard to recall that, relatively speaking, we had no reason to be ashamed of what we accomplished in our half of North America, and much reason to be proud. But proud as our forebears were of the country that they were building, they were very much of the view that its success was not a matter of luck. On the contrary, they believed that Canada and Canadians succeeded as they did because they had been endowed by history and by providence with a very specific set of institutions and behaviors. We could welcome people from all over the world. We could populate this huge and sometimes stern piece of geography and make it all work because of the kind of people that we were and the kind of people newcomers were expected to become. And central to this view of the character of Canadians, remember, that's one of the reasons I talked about Pericles' funeral oration. What was that all about? It was about the character of Athens and of Athenians. And the character of Canada and Canadians is just as important. Central to this view of the character of Canadians and their institutions was a notion of individual freedom and responsibility, a belief that each of us was endowed with a nature that required us to be responsible and accountable for our choices. And the corollary was that if we deprived men and women of their freedom and responsibility for themselves, that we prevented them from being fully free and fully human. Dependence on the government or on charity was therefore to be abhorred, but not because of the cost that it imposed on those who paid, but because of the damage it did to those who benefited. Our forefathers thought that human beings create themselves largely through their work. And just as our character is shaped by having to earn our way in the world, a different kind of character is formed when we make our way by living off the efforts of others. And yet in the decades since the 1960s, government and enlightened opinion in Canada has turned its back to a very large extent on these attitudes and behaviors and values. And while I would want to make the case that we've actually made modest progress back, there is much that remains to be done. We tolerated, pick a few examples. We tolerated an unemployment insurance program that paid large people and continues to pay large numbers of people not to work. We enriched welfare to the point that in the mid-1990s, over 12% of the population of our then wealthiest province, Ontario, was claiming welfare, a proportion that rose with each recession but never declined again in the ensuing upturn. At roughly the same time, McGill economist Bill Watson, known I think to many of you, was writing that roughly 1/5 of Quebecers are on social assistance, including UI, of one form or another. And welfare does not begin to exhaust the various forms of dependence that we created. For example, we pulled many people into various forms of public employment that produced a real income but little real value. Now, all of this was a huge innovation in Canada, huge innovation. Contrary to an article of faith of our revisionist age, for years, one of the things that distinguished Canada from the United States was Canadians' unbreakable attachment to a demanding work ethic and a strong distaste for any kind of dependence on the public purse. In fact, one of the ways in which the founders of the Dominion thought that the new country distinguished itself from the United States was in the higher levels of welfare dependence to be found in the populist republic to the south, where voters could and did vote themselves benefits at the expense of the rich, a danger of populist democracy against which Alexis de Tocqueville had warned in his classic Democracy in America. The individualist liberty that was taken to be a British subject's birthright was thought to be inimical to a radical democracy's temptation to level down the achievements of society's most successful members.